Hello, this is Michael Cross here, and this is part of my series on media and how it manipulates. I mean, Noam Chomsky once said something like most people don't realize there's billions spent every year to propagandize you. And I'm not going to go into all the specifics of that yet. But basically, propaganda is to show you only one side of an issue versus showing every side to an issue. So you could use one side or you could use two sides as long as you control both sides. But ultimately, that's what propaganda is. But there's a lot of aspects I'd like to deal with, and I'd like to do something here that most people have never talked about. And that is the concept of our children's programming, what kids are watching, and how that affects us. Now, most of you watching this right now either came up in the generations that you could call like the younger baby boomers or Gen X, and that generation mostly watched for cartoons. Would watch like Saturday morning cartoons, sometimes after school cartoons. And most of these would be programs that were actually adult programs, either series like the Flintstones, or they were shorts like your Tom and Jerry's and your Bugs Bunny type cartoons. Now again, these were either for adult consumption at night, similar to The Simpsons, but kids would watch them too. And years after these shows were done, the idea was stick them on for children's programming. And the same thing for the Tom and Jerry's and the Bugs Bunnies. Those were for in-between movies for the most part. So you'd go to a double feature and there'd be this long intermission, and a lot of that time would be actually a cartoon. In fact, they'd advertise these particular cartoons. But again, these were made primarily for adults. And they were made for entertainment. They weren't made to influence you, except for those World War II ones, where they were trying to show that you should buy bonds. And some of them actually were quite violent, but they were to gear up the Americans to fight the Germans or to fight the Japanese. But anyway, there was no social agenda, really. And then we go into let's say the 1980s, you started seeing product placement cartoons, what I call them, where you have an action figure that you make, and then you make a cartoon around it. And then you want the kids to go to the store and I want this one. And then there's different versions of those and so forth. So those were not done so much to manipulate people into believing one way or another. They usually came with some little moral, whether they were for the guys' cartoons to be valiant for something, or the girls' cartoons, it was to be nice to each other and so forth. But they were to sell products. But then something started happening. Later you started seeing more of these cartoons that seemed to have more of an agenda, trying to, maybe throw in the beginnings of the wokeism. The ones that they just seemed to be more like your kids in a preschool and they're learning something, but it's also got a little bit of a message to it. And sometimes that message could just be the way the colors are used, or the way that the people are talking, or the interaction, or the composition of the cast. But they were actually something that seemed to be these seem to be trying to teach you something. And I'm not talking about teaching you better math, although there are some cartoons actually out there that you can have for the kids that will teach them math skills and stuff. But most of them are they're just kind of, fluffy, in my opinion. And the thing is, I've seen two things recently about cartoons. And one of them was that there was this movement of maybe having your kids watch older cartoons, and a lot of parents are concerned that a lot of these newer cartoons are too fast-paced. They didn't talk about agenda in this article, but they're too fast-paced. They're too much bright colors and so forth. And then there's the the idea that they're sort of like, more of a babysitting thing. And a lot of parents are starting to go back to the old cartoons, which you can find a lot of these on YouTube, or you can buy them on DVD still. A lot of cartoons are on YouTube. You can watch I think you can watch all the Bullwinkle cartoons, for instance, which was a TV series for adults in the early 60s. You can watch those on YouTube for free. Turn them on to the TV set, and voila, you've got it. Yeah, and I've noticed that young children that I've worked with, they love it. They absolutely love it. And they also have good storylines that they have to follow over and over, when they have the next episode. And so it builds their ability to follow a concept, which I think is lacking in a lot of cartoons nowadays. There's also something I saw out of Canada. And you had a situation in which you had a school district that was wanting to get rid of books. Now again, this is not talking about cartoons, but the concept overlaps. And in their library, they wanted to kind of purge the books that were written before 2008 because they felt that they may have, harmful content. And you know what I mean by harmful. It might, maybe be more traditional or whatever. And so the idea was maybe that everything after 2008 is designed with more of, what do you call it, wokeism in a lot of cases. So the thing is, though, that as Orwell said, all art is propaganda. And if all art is propaganda, then that means that that would include cartoons and so forth. And maybe when you are choosing shows to let your children watch or let your grandchildren watch, you should keep in mind what maybe the agenda is. And maybe it would be better to choose the older stuff. There's a lot of people that are, starting to even, choose entertainment movies and stuff because it doesn't have the whole wokeism. I mean, you turn on movies nowadays for adults and, it takes about, 5 minutes for most of them to start getting into an agenda versus entertainment itself. And if you're setting your kids in front of a TV set, you need to start thinking what they are being programmed to believe. And if you do that, you'll get to a point in which you may decide that, unlike the school in Canada, you may decide, you know what, maybe I'll just choose stuff that's pre-1970 for my kids to watch. Kids will watch it. They love it. So, think about that. It has nothing to do with something being behind the times, like a book. A book could be 400 years old and still be a quality book to read. And the same is true of entertainment on TV. Just because something's new doesn't make it better, and just because something's old doesn't make it inferior. But if you consider the agendas that's coming forth, maybe it would be a good idea to consider banning in your household stuff that's more recent. Anyway, that's all for now. Please subscribe, a little button down there on the bottom, and there will be more shows coming up. Thank you.